Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about things that are going on. I kind of hate making these, but I just really think it'll be easier for me to talk about this um, to keep people who are following my Patreon aware of what's going on. Um, the funny thing is, people who are just subscribed to the YouTube channel are probably not aware that I've been working on this project book, rhythm and coordination book. Um, and my goal was to be releasing a chapter every week. Um, and my goal was to get ahead enough working on that that if something came up, I would be able to still have something to post every week. But inevitably, just my life being what it is, I got some work that just absolutely crushed my ability to do that. Um, so um, essentially, what happened was I got asked to play a musical coming up, and they liked me there because I always do these things. I actually did this curtailed some of my work last summer. I'll back up to that. Uh, I had played a gig for them in an emergency where they needed a bass player to fill in for a guy I know he had to back out last minute, and they asked me to play bass. I don't play bass, so I played bass on keys, and it turned out fine. And then after playing another show, actually on keys, like a synth book, they asked me to play the next show, which was a bass book. And I'm like, that bassist is available. You could just get a bassist. And they're like, we'll just have you do it. You did it on keys. That's fine. We'll let you do that. But I had 6 weeks in this particular instance. So I'm like, I'll learn bass. The funny thing about that was I owned a bass specifically because like 4 years prior, somebody had asked me to play bass because they didn't know if I played bass, and it was for just like a real chill, like chord lead sheet type thing. I think for like some praise band type stuff. So that would have been like really easy. I was like, okay, the next time, if that guy asked me to play bass again or something like that for that kind of situation, I'm pretty sure I could pick up bass well enough to play, simple 4 chord progressions. But no, I had a bass, and then this show came up. Now that's quite a different thing than playing, simple bass lines for 4 chord progressions. I actually had to learn to actually read and play on bass, like at a decent level. Um, but I had 6 weeks to do it, and I did, and I managed to do it, and I was able to read the show. And a very important takeaway there is, I focused on a method book. Even though I had this short amount of time, I worked out of a method book alongside working on the songs. I think what a lot of people would do is go, oh my God, I have to work on this, and they just work on the tunes. But working on that method book is what really gave me a lot of literacy that I needed, so that I could actively play the show like I needed to and not essentially be memorizing all of the numbers. So I got passable. I got actually okay at sight reading at a very basic level on bass. It's one of those things where I haven't really touched bass since then. But the nice thing about that is that if you put in that sort of investment where you're actually working on the literacy side of it, I'm confident that if I go back, I will pick up not where I left off, but not far from it. I would not have lost a lot of that. I've noticed that with previous instruments that I've put some time into. I return and I'm about 80% of where I left off, and I can very quickly get in the swing and then make progress beyond that point. So if somebody asked me to play bass again, I would feel relatively confident taking that gig, assuming I have a proper amount of time to prepare for it. Not like a piano thing where it's like, oh, you can give me 3 days, that's fine. I would never do that for like bass. Anyway, the point is, I took on this show. They like me there, so they asked that they just want me to do things in the pit, and they got excited because I had played EWI on a previous show. I was playing that synth book on Newsies, and there were some spots in there that really, they just don't work, like some oboe solos. You can't get the sort of expression and vibrato and things like that on a keyboard. Even with an expression pedal, you just can't get that sound. You can't get the control. And having a wind background it's pretty easy for me to get that sound. And apparently I was even able to fool some other professional musicians. They're like, wow, who's playing oboe back there? And, my wife, who is actually an oboist and a woodwind fiddler, she wasn't playing oboe for that show. She's like, hey, it's him on EWI. And they're like, what? It's on EWI? It's not that convincing of an oboe sound, honestly, but it was close enough because it was played musically. That's the important thing. Anyway, they got really excited that's like, wow, that, if we have parts that we need covered. Anyway, let's get to the point. So I basically agreed to play bassoon for this show. It's like, how hard can a bassoon book be? I mean, it's, kind of like, I'm thinking along the lines of like bass, where it's like, there's not that much going on. It's a monophonic instrument. It's a low instrument. So this is where I fucked up, because apparently this show is famously bassoon heavy. It is a crazy bassoon show. I am definitely deep in over my head with my EWI skills compared to what this book involves. For one, the keys are crazy, which that was to be expected with a theater show, but it's very, very intense bassoon stuff. If you're curious, you could go listen to the song I've Decided to Marry You from A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder. That song is basically just a bassoon solo, or like a duet between the bassoon and the singers. It's crazily fast and intense. But the whole show is like that. It's harder than I expected. It has very advanced stuff. I mean, for one, like tenor clef. I'm not good at tenor clef, so that's a thing, and there's a lot of tenor clef, which, that's a thing that happens on bassoon, but you wouldn't expect it to happen that often in musical theater stuff. It usually doesn't, because I've had people who play those books, bassoon books, or doubling books with bassoon in theater, and they don't run into the crazy bassoon things very often. And also I've mostly read EWI on treble clef. I always have in the past. And there's this weird thing where there's like a short circuit in your brain, or my brain anyway, because you've created these associations between certain things and certain registers. This happens to me on trumpet too. I'm actually really good at transposing on trumpet, and I can do octave transposition easily, so I can displace things by octaves, no problem. But if you have me read a bass clef part on trumpet, which I'm fine at reading bass clef, but something doesn't compute. I'm very competent on trumpet. No key throws me off, but if I'm reading bass clef, it's like my brain is like, this is weird. I lose track of where the top and bottom of my range are relative to what's on the staff. It's a whole thing. And that's sort of the problem I'm running into with EWI to some degree, is that I'm not used to reading bass clef on EWI, so that was harder than I was expecting, and it's crazy parts. And then funny thing about this is that I was playing this church orchestra gig that I do, and I was doing just some octave displacement, just to save chops because it was rehearsal, and I started reading bass clef on trumpet, when I was supposed to be reading a treble clef part, and it was just like, oh my god, my brain is too deep in this thing right now. So yeah, that's really the thing, and that curtailed me working on my rhythm and coordination book. And it might for a little bit still. Luckily now I've come to grips with where I'm at on this. There's always this point early on where I don't quite have a grasp on where I am relative to a gig. This happens to a very small degree with piano, where I might get a very large amount of music, and some of it's pretty difficult, and I really just need to drink all of it in and be like, okay, I've assessed the timetable of how long it will take me to prepare this, and I've gotten good at doing that. I'm less good at that on instruments I'm less good at, like EWI, and then on top of that, it's all this other crap. So I was just immersing myself hardcore in EWI and just barely doing anything else, except taking little breaks to throw out thoughts on Reddit for quite a while. And hey, once again, I worked through a method book. Once again, despite the panic that I was having once I realized how dense this book was, I worked through a method book. because that creates so much of that literacy. And it really has helped. It would have been so terrible and pointless for me to have just dived into the book, and just try to like muscle through everything. A method book really, even though it's a bassoon method book, I would have picked any bass clef book, but I had a bassoon one, and they're giving bassoon specific things, and the EWI does not work like a bassoon at all. But the sort of pedagogical exercises in there forced me to come up with fingering solutions on the EWI to deal with specific situations, of which I have many very strange alternate fingering situations. But yeah, so I dropped off the planet to some degree working on that. And the thing is, I already have a very heavy schedule. So I have this worship ministry thing that I do weekly. If you don't know, I'm not religious, but I end up playing for a lot of churches, and I am the music minister for this campus ministry, and it entails lots of me arranging things, and I have to play organ and piano and guitar and sing and lead everything, and I do a lot of stuff with the looper and ocarina and all the kinds of stuff. It's mostly me arranging things. That's pretty involved, and I was doing really well. I was out ahead planning a lot of that stuff for weeks out, as much as I could for how much I was provided the music ahead of time, and I started arranging those things, and I was doing great on that. I have this church orchestra thing, which that's not so hard in terms of showing up, because I can just show up and sight read on trumpet, no problem. It's an issue of trumpet is a very physically taxing instrument that requires you to stay physically conditioned. So that's just literally daily maintenance practice that is time consuming, and it's mental energy consuming, because it's not a thing I look forward to doing, and I still have to do it. And it just takes away time that I could be spending practicing other things that are more valuable for me to practice. I'm also accompanying three choirs coming up very shortly. They have a concert in less than a month, and all together. So I've got many octavos I'm preparing for that, and then I have some instrumental accompaniments, and then some of those are pretty challenging, and then somewhere after I got the EWI book, which was already, I was drowning. I was actually realizing I have too much music. Like, I have more music than I can prepare in the amount of time that I have. Somebody dropped another accompaniment on me, and normally this would be the point where I would just say no, but because of who it was, I kind of couldn't say no, and so I agreed to it, and it's mostly reasonable, but there are some very dense spots in that accompaniment. So now I've just got all these instrumental accompaniments and all this stuff, and so what the timetable has looked like is I have that campus ministry every Thursday. So that's something, it's a very different type. I'm playing very different instruments every time. Like, I will be playing a lot of guitar this Thursday. And there's going to be another one of those next Tuesday. And I have to leave town that Wednesday. So like the 8th and the 9th, somewhere around there. I have a rehearsal this weekend. On Saturday, I have a concert Friday, so it's hard to even keep this in track, like, mentally. I have the let me collect my thoughts. I have the little worship ministry on Thursday night, and then I have a concert Friday afternoon with the orchestra, and then Saturday I have several rehearsals with all of these instrumental soloists. Sunday I have church orchestra again. Monday, I'm going to be scrambling to get ready because I have that church ministry, the campus ministry, again that Tuesday, because they moved it back from the Thursday time because I'm going to be out of town, which also sucks because I will be out of town until the next Saturday. And as soon as I get back, I have that church orchestra Sunday right when I get back. And that's Sunday morning. Sunday night, that's when rehearsals start for this musical. That's when I have to have this entire book learned on EWI. I had less than a month to get all of this together on EWI while preparing all of these other things. Oh, and then those concerts, the concerts, well, the instrumental accompaniments are going to be the same day that I have opening weekend for the musical, because it will open the weekend after that. And I have I have to specifically like adjust the schedule for the accompaniment so that I can do all of my accompaniments in the morning for that contest, go play 2 shows that night, 2 musical shows that Saturday night, Sunday morning, church orchestra, Sunday afternoon, another show for the musical, and then Tuesday night, I will have to play all of those choir accompaniments. Thursday night, I'm back doing the campus ministry. And then the show's running for 3 weeks, 3 weekends. So that's going to be this overlap of all of these things. Now, it won't be so bad once I get there. Once we've hit opening weekend, I will probably be where I'm going to be with the EWI for the show. But you can kind of see how everything is really just, there's just too much. It's all on top of each other all at once. This is just kind of one of those life of a working musician type things. And it's frustrating because I really want to be more consistent with this stuff. I itch to make this pedagogical content. Like it burns inside of me when I'm seeing questions and people having problems because there aren't resources that address the very specific problems that I'm trying to solve. I'm trying to create those resources, and it's just hard to have that time. It's easy to post on Reddit very quickly because I type fast and I can just throw those thoughts out and instantly edit them kind of in real time and then go back to practicing. Working in Finale and actually thinking through all of the things and putting together the exercises, that is a little more labor intensive and it's kind of mentally intensive. It takes a lot of time to do that, but I always want those things so that I can just throw those things at people on Reddit in general. And, I'd like to make more videos on top of that because sometimes you can say better in a video. Well, some people could, I probably couldn't because I ramble, but, you could say more in a video. You could get to, there's certain things that are easier to demonstrate in a video. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. That's the crazy situation that I'm in. And then I also realized that, like people who are subscribed to YouTube probably aren't even aware that I'm doing that rhythm and coordination thing. And then, I assume most people who are patrons are not even aware, or they're not unaware of the fact that I've posted a couple of YouTube videos. I had recorded one a little ways out that I was planning to release later, and I did that. But then I always forget to cross-post those to Patreon. I'm very bad at all of that, and I'm very bad at the self-promotion part. I don't tell people to jump on my Patreon. I'm very thankful to my patrons, but I almost don't like talking about it because it almost always sounds like an advertisement, and I hate the YouTube call to action stuff. Like, I know that it works, that you're supposed to tell everybody to like and subscribe, and I know that realistically, if more people liked and subscribed, yes, I would be able to get more information out there to more people. It would reach more people, but it just, in my soul, I gag when I hear people say that, and I can tell that deep inside it's a self-promotion thing. You can see the people who are just really, they're trying to be YouTubers. And so they're jumping in real hard with the super fast talk and the quick cuts and the constant calls to action and and then that little trope of like, no, if you found this helpful, like and subscribe, and then it'll reach more people and that'll be great and it'll enrich the world. But most of all, it'll enrich me. And that's just not what I'm in it for. And I know that it would be helpful for me to do those things, but I just bristle at it. I bristle at all of the YouTube stuff, the self-promotion stuff. And I guess that's one of the reasons that, at some point I just basically decided not to paywall anything on Patreon. And I kind of don't want to ever do that. So if you're not a patron and you're curious about like that rhythm and coordination thing, you can just go like, I don't know, bookmark the page, or I don't know if you can follow on a Patreon you're not subscribed to. Everything I post is public, and everything that I link in my Google Drive is public, and I like to keep it that way. Um, you know, it's really nice, and I'm glad that people are supportive, and that really does encourage me to do more of that and turn down more real world work. Honestly, but part of that is that a little bit of doing that, being pushed into that, I think gives me the edge in terms of just being aware pedagogically and constantly pushing myself into these weird directions, like doing the EWI thing. It gives me an awareness that I see missing in so many other musicians trying to teach, because they are so far advanced and they're never outside of their comfort zone, and they're not working. So they're not running into the same real world problems. And I think it creates an empathy problem where they can't really empathize with what it's like to be a beginner again, and to struggle with very basic things and have to connect dots from a very, beginnery spot. So like, I don't want to stop taking work, but I have decided to not take certain work. Basically, there are specific people that I work with and I will continue to work with, and I basically don't want to tell them no. But there are a lot of gigs that I've done that I will explicitly just not do anymore, or I will price myself so high that they'll basically just have to, there's almost no chance they would hire me. And if they did, great, I'd make quite the windfall. But, honestly, like most church subbing work, it's at a point where that's almost not worth my time investment for how much I can make for it compared to the other work that I do. And also because I don't want to use that extra time there. If I have that time, I would rather be spending it making all of this material that I wish I could be making. I kind of just, part of me wishes I could just like take a sabbatical from all of the gigging and just like pour out all of this stuff, but it can't, that doesn't work, And I also think that like that, as much as I would love that, it would also crush part of my soul to not be out there doing the work to some degree. I enjoy it, and I enjoy the ways that it stretches me, and I enjoy the ways that it keeps me very engaged with a lot of stuff. And honestly, I just love musical theater. I really enjoy that. It's funny because I didn't have any experience with that until like long after college, and once I started playing in pits, it's like, man, this is great. It's a very unique experience. But yeah, I'm still trying to take less work, but I really do struggle to turn down work at the theater, work with a handful of choir directors that I have a very good relationship with, work with a handful of private instructors whose students I accompany regularly, and that campus ministry thing. It's a very good, like, so many of the churches, especially down here in the South, are extremely toxic. It seems like every one of them is going through some crazy schism because of how much they hate gay people, which sucks. This campus ministry is basically, it's such a weird thing. It's mostly like a group. I feel like it's barely a campus ministry. It's mostly about, I feel like most of the group is about addressing people's religious trauma from the terrible abusive religions they grew up in. And it's sort of an antidote to that, but sort of dressed up in a churchy way. I don't know. I find it really weird. Like, as an atheist, I find it really strange. But I'm glad, because it's a super affirming group, super, LGBT friendly and all of those things, and very into inclusion and social justice and just good things, just being better human beings, which is, what it should be about. Right. But then, the one gig that I'm still doing that I don't want to be doing is this orchestra thing. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of stress just because of the maintenance practice on trumpet. And like that church is horrible. They are one of those schisming churches that is joining the Global Methodist, which basically is the we hate gays sect of Methodists. We hate them so strongly we needed to separate from the church for it. And it is such a toxic place. And the only reason I do it is honestly because my wife wants me to play that gig with her because she likes playing it. We like all of the people in the orchestra. We really like the orchestra director. It honestly does not pay enough for the headache it causes me. It and how much bile I feel in the back of my throat whenever they're talking. Luckily, I don't have to sit through the whole service almost ever. But like, yeah, that's one gig I would love to just put on the chopping block. But you know, there are these handful of other things that I don't want to get rid of. But almost all other work, you know, I did like a bunch of memorial services and other things like that last year. I don't think I want to take almost any of those one-off things. A lot of the church subbing jobs I don't want to take. Maybe with the exception of one specific church organ subbing. But no, in general, I just don't want to do a lot of these one-off gigs. Anyway, that's just an update on where I'm at and just the craziness going on in my life. And if you can't tell, I also managed to get mildly sick 2 or 3 days ago. I still have a little bit of nasally whatever, but it's just like, man, when it rains, it pours. So anyway, I'm gonna leave it there, and hopefully I manage to get through all of this. I'm sure it'll all work out. It'll be what it'll be when it's done. And in the meantime, I am going to try. I meant to say, now that I do sort of, I have hit that point where I have assessed where I am with the EWI thing, and I kind of know where I am with all of my other upcoming gigs. I have a good idea of how long it's going to take me to prepare, and I'm not panicking anymore. I think I'm just going to try to make a point whenever I encounter something during my practice to just make a quick rambling video about it while it's on the top of my head and just drop them randomly. I know that's not how you're supposed to do it. But I think it just helps me to do that just while it's in my brain, jump on, talk about it, especially while it's fresh. I think I ramble less when it's fresh. And then, you know, post it quickly and get back to work. Sort of the way that I end up doing on Reddit. You know, like I said, Reddit's one of those things where I can just quickly throw out ideas and answer questions and get right back to work. And I think I just need to do that and not try to overthink it. Like I do have the scripts I'm still working on, but I think I just need to let myself toss something out there randomly whenever it's available, especially if otherwise there's going to be some sort of a content drought because I'm so busy, and it's either do slightly lower production quality stuff so that I can keep talking about these things and still be useful, or not do anything at all. So it's, I think I'd rather just keep doing some of it. Anyway, I said I was going to leave it there, so this time I'll actually leave it there.